Yeah. Two coaches engage in a bit of a war of words, and something about this Saturday's game versus LSU makes Jim McElwain laugh. We'll tell you what it is coming up next right here on AT&T SEC Country Live. Hello everyone and welcome to AT&T SEC Country Live. My name is Brandon Adams. I am here every day, but if you look to my left, you will notice that you do not see the former Alabama All-American Mike Johnson. Mike not with us today. Y'all make sure you send your thoughts and prayers out to him. He's taking care of a little personal business today. We hope to have Mike back tomorrow, but we are very glad today to say hello to Brandon Walker. You know him and you love him from the Mississippi State Podcast right here at SECCountry.com, and it's good to have you in the room, in the building, where all the action is today. Brandon, thanks for your time.
It's great to be here. I've been waiting for the call-up for a long time. I was finally able to slash Mike's tires, and he's taking care of that today, so I'm here. Let's go.
It's good to have Brandon here. We'll also have Mike Griffith, who covers the Tennessee Vols. We'll talk about the turmoil surrounding Butch Jones. We'll do that coming up around 40 minutes after the hour. We'll also take a look back at a great year in recent SEC history coming up, courtesy of our friends at Tony Sachery's. That is all on the way. Before any of that, though, let me remind you that AT&T is a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. And let's dive into the big news around the Southeastern Conference for today with item number one on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And I said this in the open to start the show, a bit of a war of words here between a couple of the SEC coaches. I don't know that it reached DEFCON 1 status, but I think at least one of the coaches was probably bothered by the exchange. Now, Brandon, let me set up exactly what happened here. Earlier in the week, Kirby Smart let it be known that his quarterback situation is going to play out a little differently this week than it has earlier in the season. Jake Fromm has been starting, but now Jacob Eason, the Georgia starter from the beginning of the season, he's apparently healthy again, played some in the fourth quarter against Tennessee. And Kirby said this week's starter will be determined by what happens during practice. In fact, here's how Kirby himself said it.
It'll be just like last week. It'll be evaluated in practice, and I do think that Jacob is much closer to 100%. Obviously, last week he didn't get cleared until somewhere around midweek, so for him it was important to knock the rust off. He felt like he did that in that game, got to go out there, and he'll compete this week.
So that's what Kirby Smart said, that quarterback's going to be no different than any other position. We're going to see the competition during the week. Vanderbilt coach Derek Mason, the Bulldogs' opponent this Saturday, though, apparently not buying that. Here was Mason's response yesterday.
I believe, Fromm, is the guy. I believe Easton's an extremely talented quarterback, but that's up to Kirby who he decides to go with. I mean, he's not fooling me. I mean, if that's what we think we're doing here. I mean, that young man, Fromm's won ball games. I mean, he just came off a 48-0 win. We can quit with the coaching dramatics. I mean, when it's all said and done, I mean, they're 5-0. They're a good football team with lots of talent. They're playing extremely well. And, hats off to Kirby because he's done a great job.
Well, speaking of Kirby Smart, as you might imagine, reporters then go to Kirby. Hey, did you hear what Derek Mason said about you? What's your response to that? And Kirby on Tuesday night had one.
Again, Derek Mason's entitled to his opinion. Derek Mason's he's not at our practices. He doesn't watch our practice tape that I know of, so I'm not really concerned with those comments.
So, Brandon, here's my question for you. For a Vanderbilt team that's kind of already gotten in trouble for shooting its mouth off before a game this season, and for a Georgia team that's actually kind of corrected some opponents who've kind of done some of the same stuff, is Derek Mason sort of starting this, engaging in this? Is this a good idea for Mason and the Commodores on Saturday, given the fact that Georgia's red hot at the moment?
I don't think it's a bad idea. I don't think it's a bad idea at all. I think Derek Mason is going to be blunt. He's going to be frank. He's always going to be Derek Mason. I like that about him. It's a little different than a player calling out Alabama the way he did. But I think Derek Mason, I agree with him and I disagree with him at the same time. I agree with him that Fromm is probably the guy, and I believe that Derek Mason is probably getting ready for Fromm. But what I don't believe is that this is Kirby Smart engaging in coaching dramatics. I don't think Kirby Smart is being dramatic for dramatic's sake. I believe he's saying the right things to his team. He's keeping everybody engaged at practice. He's keeping everybody where they need to be mentally and physically for the game. So Kirby Smart's saying the right things. Derek Mason is just, I guess he thinks he's kind of outsmarting Smart. He knows that Fromm is going to play, or he believes he knows. I agree with Mason, and I disagree that this is dramatic.
Well, you said trying to outsmart Smart. James Crump in the comment section brings up a point that he thinks that maybe Mason wants Fromm to be the quarterback, and that's his own sort of gamesmanship there on that. Is there a chance that's true, that Mason actually wants Fromm to be the guy on Saturday and hopes it's not Jacob Eason, the quarterback, incidentally, that the Commodores beat last year in Athens?
I would probably disagree with that. I would disagree that he wants Fromm to be the guy. I think whether it's Fromm or Eason, Vanderbilt's probably going to be prepared the same way. They're not that different at quarterback to where you have to change everything you do in practice. But I will say this, Fromm is comfortable. Fromm has been there. The team has had Fromm around them. And Eason is the one that's coming into a new situation this year. Eason's the one that's coming off the bench. So if anything, I would think an opposing coach would want upheaval. They would want questions behind the scene. They would want Jacob Eason to come in there and kind of upset the apple cart. So no, I don't agree with that particular comment.
Chad Robinson says, it's trying to make something out of nothing. I'm a UGA fan, but Mason was completely respectful in what he said. So, Chad, I don't know that he was completely disrespectful in what he said, but if there's something in between completely respectful and completely disrespectful, that's where I think Mason is here. I mean, I talked to Chip Towers, who covers Georgia Bulldogs for DogNation.com earlier today. He said that he thought that Smart was a little bothered by Mason's comment here. So if it's completely respectful, I don't know that Kirby Smart would be bothered by it, but it sounds like for the people who were in the room with Kirby last night, he was a little bothered by this.
Respectful or disrespectful, the question is, was it necessary? Was it necessary for Vanderbilt's coach to come out and say, aha, I know who the quarterback's going to be. You're not going to fool me. No, it wasn't necessary at all. I think Derek Mason, his tone was fine. He was respectful. But at the same time, was it really necessary to bring that out and to actually say something, to make a statement that Kirby Smart would eventually have to respond to?
Jeff Perry, I like his comment. He says, the SEC needs more mouth from its coaches. And Jeff, from that standpoint, I completely agree with you that while I don't think this was a good idea, and Vanderbilt's kind of been beaten up already this season when a player shot its mouth off, for the most part, I do think coaches are a little too careful. And maybe Mason is the kind of coach who at this point in time in his career feels like he's got nothing to lose, and so he's kind of speaking and coaching like that. I guess I do wish, to go back to Jeff's point here in the comment section, that a few more SEC coaches would kind of adopt the same mindset.
Everybody's so careful. Everybody's robotic. Everybody's scared to give bulletin board material. Everybody's scared to jump out of their lane and give something like this that has to be responded to, and all of a sudden you do have a war of words. So everybody's buttoned up, and I understand it in this day and age of Twitter takes everything, Facebook takes everything, but I like two coaches bantering back and forth in the media. It gives Saturday a little bit more punch. Georgia and Vanderbilt, would we be really talking about this game as much if there wasn't this little added wrinkle? I like it when coaches do this.
All right, let me move on here. Item number 2 on our AT&T SEC Country Line First and 10 list. Speaking of big games this Saturday, one of the biggest in the SEC is one we've been talking about here on this program for months and months. It's that rivalry, and yes, now it is one between Florida and LSU. And back during the offseason, one of the things that we thought might be a little extra spice in this rivalry was the announcement by Florida that the LSU game, scheduled for this Saturday, is going to be the Gators' homecoming. Now, when Florida coach Jim McElwain made an appearance on the SEC coaches teleconference on Wednesday, he was asked about the presence of LSU on homecoming and what that meant. Was that intentional? We'll show you what McElwain had to say here. He says, I still laugh about it. What creates the buzz is whatever's good. I'm not even sure the team knows it's homecoming. That's funny stuff. Now, I agree that the homecoming festivities are a bigger deal for regular students and alumni than it is for the players on the field, but I'm still not quite sure I'm buying that the homecoming announcement here when it was made wasn't an intentional swipe at LSU. Do you think Florida scheduled LSU intentionally to kind of stir the pot in what is kind of a growing rivalry at the moment?
100%. Of course they did. Listen, the players might not know it's homecoming. They're going to go through their paces the same as they always do. They're going to get ready for LSU. But the schedule makers knew it. The schedule makers knew LSU was coming in. Listen, Florida had several opportunities to schedule homecoming. They had Northern Colorado. That game ultimately didn't get played. They had a home schedule with UAB, with Vanderbilt, with Texas A&M, with Northern Colorado, and with LSU. And LSU is the one that just happens to get picked for homecoming. No, it was completely intentional. And again, like we just said, we like when coaches add some spice. That's adding spice from the schedule makers and from the administrators that ordinarily wouldn't be there. I like that too.
Yeah, Christopher Ball in the comment section says, watch LSU upset Florida. And listen, I know that it may seem like LSU right now is kind of coming in on a down note, having lost its own homecoming game to Troy a week ago. And by the way, wouldn't that be interesting if maybe the first SEC team ever to lose its own homecoming and win on someone else's homecoming? That may be what LSU's playing for on Saturday. But I think if you count LSU completely out of this game, I think you are potentially doing so at your own peril.
That would be foolish, and you would be ignoring the recent history of the rivalry anyway. I mean, last year, Florida has to move its game because of a hurricane. Florida has to go on the road when they didn't expect to. They have to go to an LSU team who's pretty good on the road. Nobody expected Florida to win that game, and Florida goes into Baton Rouge and wins on the dramatic last-second goal line stand. You cannot count anybody in this SEC out. Outside of maybe Alabama, winning as many games as they're going to win, you can't count anybody out going into anybody else's building and winning this year, I don't believe. So you can't count LSU out of going into Gainesville and winning.
Cliff Nelson, who's a big LSU fan, Brandon, you should know in the comment section, says, when LSU beats Florida, my season's going to be complete. Nothing else matters at this point. And that is one of the things I think that does make this game interesting on Saturday. And I actually sort of chastised Mike for this early in the week. He said that he's not as into the game anymore because LSU's not good, and really Florida is probably only okay at this point. And I said, listen, when Thursday gets here, which is the last day of the week for us working on this show, when you get close to the weekend and Saturday's game, I think that LSU-Florida is going to feel like a big game again. I think it's going to be the kind of game that even non-Gators, Tigers fans are going to be excited about. Do you agree with me that the pizzazz is still there for the game, even though LSU is not really living up to its end of the billing?
I believe the pizzazz is still there. Listen, every SEC team has 8 games. Every SEC team has 8 SEC games, and the halves in this conference, the LSUs, the Georgias, the Auburns, the Floridas, there's not all that many of them. And when they get together, it's always a big game. This rivalry has been heated the last couple of years. Last year added a lot of pepper to it. I mean, it's really boiling right now. I don't care if LSU lost to Troy. What would make LSU fans happier than after losing to Troy, you pick yourself up and you ruin Florida's season? That's what it's about right now. It's not about making LSU an SEC championship contender. It's not about doing this or that for LSU. They could ruin Florida's season this Saturday by beating Florida in Gainesville.
By the way, Daniel Robbins in the comment section says, where is Mike? I will let you know that this is Brandon Walker. He hosts the SEC Country podcast for the Mississippi State Bulldogs. He's in for Mike Johnson today. Mike taking care of a little personal business. He's got some family stuff going on, so y'all be thinking about Mike. He'll be fine. He'll be back, but he's got a little stuff to think about. The kind of person that sends out some prayers. Send out a couple prayers Mike's way today. We'll look forward to catching up with him here on SEC Country Live again later on the week. Let me also get Patty Peterson here, who says that Coach Mack and the rest of the UF football team need to avoid unnecessary penalties on both sides of the football. When they can do that, and they can stop the run game against LSU so they don't give up so many yards. So, yeah, listen, you can focus in on the LSU issues here, but Florida coming into this game has its own problems as well. It wasn't a perfect performance against Vanderbilt last week. You had the really interesting scenario that allowed Florida to win against Kentucky, and even in the Tennessee game, there were moments when the Gators just weren't looking all that good. So I think Patty's comments right here that even though the spotlight is on the issues for LSU on Saturday, Florida's got its own stuff to deal with too.
They have their own stuff to deal with, but this is an odd season in the SEC where Florida really hasn't ever looked perfect. They haven't really ever looked all that good. They've had moments where they look very good. They've had moments where they look pretty bad. But you look at it, they're 3-1, and they're right where they need to be in the SEC East. They're right on a collision course with Georgia in the East to decide that division later on this year. So even though Florida hasn't looked great, they're right on track as far as the SEC East race goes. They're right on track as a football team. And this game, the intrigue here is which team who hasn't really played all that well yet, which team can rise up and use the strength of this rivalry, use the strength of momentum, and get this win? Because I'm not ruling LSU out, and I'm not ruling out Florida having a bad performance on their home field.
I will say this, and then we'll talk about the Alabama Crimson Tide here for a moment. The game for the entirety of this show that has generated more comments in the offseason, when it was not being played, and even here this week, is LSU Florida. There is such a legit hatred between these two schools right now. Going back to the cancellation from last year, the war of words between Scott Strickland and Joe Oliva, this is a legit rivalry, and we see this thing play out in our comment section every day.
You know, back in the 2000s, when Tebow was there, when Nick Saban was there, and then Les Miles was really rolling at LSU, this rivalry was the one cross rivalry where you could count on every year delivering. This rivalry was always big time. Both teams were always in the top 10. And even though the teams have fallen a little bit, you've had extra off-the-field stuff that's added fire to the rivalry and made it very interesting. And I really think this is probably, outside of maybe Auburn and Georgia, this is probably the best cross-division rivalry in the entire league right now.
You may be right about that. It's Brandon Walker. I'm Brandon Adams. It's AT&T SEC Country Live. AT&T, a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T Entertainment your way. As promised, let's talk a little Tide here. Item number 3 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And I thought that Christopher Walsh at SECCountry.com published an interesting stat when it comes to the Alabama Crimson Tide. You want to sort of look into their dominance, why the Tide's been so successful this season, really like every season, but this year in particular. How about the dominance in first quarter so far this season? According to Walsh there at SEC Country on the Alabama page, right now Alabama outscoring its opponents in the first quarter of games 76-6 here this season, which gives you a chance to play backups, gives you a chance to sort of add to your depth, but also prohibits your opponent from ever truly thinking it's in the game. Is that not a staggering statistic that sort of explains why Alabama is rolling the way that it is right now?
Staggering, but not surprising. I'm about to give you, I'm glad I'm here today. I'm going to give you some shocking, dynamic analysis you probably won't get from anywhere else. Alabama's a lot better than its opponents. Alabama's football team is better than its opponents. That's why they're starting so hot. That's why they're starting so well in the first quarter. I don't have the second quarter, third quarter, and fourth quarter stats with me, but I guarantee you they're a lot like the first quarter stats. Now, in the SEC, they played Vanderbilt, they played Ole Miss. They have been able to play teams that they can overmatch in the SEC. I think it'll get a little tougher for them later, where you'll see them maybe slow down in the first quarter. Maybe even this weekend in College Station, they'll slow down in the first quarter. But so far, they have just been far and away better than every single team they played, outside of maybe Florida State when Francois was healthy, and that game didn't start quite as dominant.
Let me ask you a couple quick questions on this subject, though. Do you think this is actually a byproduct of the way that they're coached by Nick Saban, or is this just kind of a, I don't want to say lucky break, but sort of a statistical coincidence more so than this is truly the way they're coached? Do you think Saban coaches fast starts into his team? And maybe more importantly, if you're an opponent for Alabama, like Texas A&M this Saturday, if you can avoid the Alabama fast start, have you just punched yourself a ticket for staying in the whole game?
I think avoiding the fast start is very key against any team that is better than you, against any team that comes in and has more talent than you. If you can keep them close to you, if you can keep your fan base in it, if you can keep your crowd in it, then you've got a puncher's chance. If you get down 14-0 to Alabama early, it's over. It is completely over. And I don't think Nick Saban coaches – Nick Saban coaches in the first quarter like he coaches the sixth-string guys in the fourth quarter. He coaches consistently all the way through. I think it's just a matter of Alabama's first-string guys are that much better than the first-string guys they have played so far. It is recruiting, it is coaching and practice, it is all of that. But Alabama's certainly a lot better. I don't really think it's Nick Saban coaching fast starts this year, because if that were the case, it seemed like that would happen every single year.
Bobby J. Smith in the comment section has got a great comment. I need to address this for a moment if you don't mind. Bobby asked me, am I going to admit that I was wrong about Brian Dable? And what you probably don't know, you may not watch every single minute of AT&T SEC Country Live.
I watch every single minute.
That's good to know. I've been very critical of the Brian Dable hire. My assumption was, and probably continues to be, that Dable's going to be an inferior offensive coordinator to Lane Kiffin. Now, thus far, the offensive results have been outstanding. So, Bobby, here's what I'm going to tell you. If it maintains this way for the rest of the season, when Alabama plays its SEC championship opponent, its national championship game, Auburn at the end of the regular season, if you're talking about Dable putting up big numbers against those teams, then yeah, I'm absolutely going to give Dable credit, and I'll admit that I was wrong. But, Bobby, as you know, being a big Tide fan, and for all the big Tide fans who are watching right now, Dable wasn't brought here to blow out Ole Miss, and he wasn't brought here to blow out Vanderbilt. That's not what you get credit for at Alabama. So let's see how Dable performs when he plays the tougher opponents on his schedule. And for Alabama, almost all of those are going to come at the end of November throughout the rest of the season, both in December and January. So that's my issue for Dable. I want to see how he does against the big opponents that Alabama plays later on this season. We thought LSU would be one of those. Maybe LSU's not going to be. But those are the games that really matter for LSU. And it's at that point in time that Dable's going to earn his paycheck. So, Bobby, yes, if Dable's coming up big then, I'll be the first to tell you I was wrong, and I'll give Alabama credit, both he and Hurts, for what the offense they've been able to put together. But I'm going to withhold judgment until I see those games that truly matter.
Can I say that I'm just really surprised? I thought Lane Kiffin and Jalen Hurts were tailor-made for each other. I thought going into the season that Lane Kiffin was made for Jalen Hurts, and it was the best marriage of offensive coordinator and quarterback that could have been possible. But Dable has done a much better job than I realized of keeping Jalen Hurts on schedule and making the most out of Jalen Hurts' talents. I didn't see that from a guy coming from the NFL. I didn't see that he was going to be able to coach Jalen Hurts so well and make the offense really seamless going into this season.
Yeah, it's that way so far. William David Josie says Bama loses to Auburn. And William, you should know, that's been my pick the entire time. When Auburn lost to Clemson, I did not run from them. Alabama doing well now, that's not going to scare me off changing my opinion either. You know, some of you in the comment section are saying, who's going to be tough for Alabama at the end of the season? If you're a Bama fan right now and you want to go on record and say that you beat Auburn easily, you beat Georgia in the SEC championship game, who I do think Alabama will play, you want to say those games are going to be easy? We'll start taking roll on that right now. I think it'll be proven wrong come the end of the month or the end of November, the start of December.
I think there are three really good teams in this league. Alabama is elite. They've proven that for several years running. I believe that Georgia and Auburn are very, very possibly elite. Second or third in the conference, it's Auburn and Georgia, and there's no question about it. Who you put second, who you put third, doesn't really matter. Alabama, to go undefeated and to get in the playoff, will have to play both. They'll have to play Georgia in the championship game, just like you said. They'll have to play Auburn. I believe that game is in Auburn this year. So Alabama, whatever the first quarter stats are right now, whatever Jalen Hurts is doing, they're going to have to prove it against the most elite competition the SEC has to offer, and they'll have to do that, like you said, last week of November and first week of December.
Don't forget, we're 20 minutes away from talking some Tennessee football. What's next for Butch Jones there in Knox? We'll do that with Mike Griffith. For now, though, item number 4 in our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list, and another embattled coach in the SEC has been LSU's Ed Orgeron, so much so that one of his own players, Christian Lacouture, had to come to his defense this week. Lacouture offering a little bit of a criticism to those, be it media members or fans, that say that right now Ed Orgeron's job ought to be in jeopardy, and that big $12 million buyout ought to be considered paid by LSU, or consider paying it if you are LSU. Here's Lacouture coming to the defense of Ed Orgeron. Take a listen.
I think it's disrespectful. I think it's absurd. Coach O is a guy that has put everything into this football program. Coach O is, you can't blame it on him, it's us. We didn't execute. He had a great game plan for us this week, and I wouldn't want anybody to do that. Blame it on us, it's us. Me being one of the leaders of the team, that I didn't prepare the team, and I didn't help prepare the team well enough that I needed to make sure we were good to go as well. This is not fully, I feel like, when people say stuff like that, it's just, it really hurts us as a team, and we feel bad for Coach O because he does not deserve that at all.
So that's an LSU player saying questioning Orgeron right now through 5 games of his first season as the full-time head coach of LSU is absurd. Do you think it's absurd?
No, not even a little bit. And that's admirable for Christian Lacouture to say that. It is admirable for a player who's been there for a while to be able to say that, say it's our fault for not executing, it's my fault for not having the guys ready. Well, life in the SEC, this is it. This is it. And if you're a coach at LSU, one of the top 10 programs in the country, one of the top programs in the SEC, a program that should and could compete for national championships every single season, and you're a first-year coach, and if you lose to Troy at home, you're going to get the buyout talk. You're going to get the should he go talk. You're going to get it. You're going to get it at LSU. You're going to get it at Auburn. You're going to get it at Georgia. You're going to get it at Tennessee. You're going to get it at Florida. This is not exclusive to LSU. This is not anything new. And Ed Orgeron was there last year, and when they made the decision to go to an interim coach, when they made the decision to turn it over to somebody who was there, that means when the house falls down, nobody's going to want to keep the architect of the house, or nobody's going to want to keep one of the house builders around. So it's natural for somebody, an LSU fan, to look at this and say, I know Ed Orgeron's been here, but it is completely, the house of cards has fallen. We got to rebuild it, and maybe he's not the guy. That is natural for a fan to do. It's just going to happen.
Jeremy Pettis says disrespectful. Coach O, the product on the field, is disrespectful to the SEC. That's what Jeremy Pettis is saying right there. And to a certain extent, I agree. And listen, I am typically the guy that's always arguing for, hey, don't change your opinion based on just a couple of games. And, I thought Auburn was good. I didn't run from that when they were struggling against Mercer, when they were losing to Clemson. I've had some questions about, some other teams. I'm not necessarily changing my opinion because things are going well for those teams right now. I think for the most part, staying the course until you're obviously wrong is generally the best course of action here. But in the case of LSU, this is not just hindsight. This is something that we said on this program before the season started. Orgeron looks like someone who needs a boss. He does not look like the boss. He looks like he ought to be turning to someone else on the sideline who is in charge of him and in charge of his decisions. I think LSU right now looks like a haphazard team. They look slightly out of control. Orgeron's comments, be it throwing Matt Canada under the bus or anything else he might have said, right now there's a lot about Ed Orgeron that just seems beneath the standard of what an SEC coach ought to be.
Listen, if Ed Orgeron had not been here before, had not gone through the SEC, and frankly, failed as a head coach. He did. He failed as a head coach at Ole Miss. He learned after 10 years and got another chance. But he failed as a head coach the first time, and this looks very familiar to LSU fans. LSU fans in the same division with Ole Miss, they saw what Orgeron was able to do in Oxford, and it looks very familiar. It looks like a leaderless ship right now. It looks like something that's kind of drifting off in the ocean with nobody steering, and that's not a good feeling. That's not a good feeling for LSU fans. And if you've got a ship like LSU has, if you expect to compete for national championships, if you can expect to compete for SEC championships, as soon as it gets off kilter, as soon as it starts falling a little bit, you panic. And listen, you can say disrespectful all you want, but as long as that direct deposit is hitting every couple of weeks and thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars are going into Ed Orgeron's bank account, he can handle the stress. He can handle the criticism because he's paid to do it.
Chris Smith in the comment section says Gators will rush for 400-plus yards against LSU on Saturday. Now, I don't think that will happen, but that's an interesting comment to make about this game, though, when you think about the fact that Florida does feel like it's found a running game with Malik Davis. And LSU, the one thing you could always count on the Tigers to do is stop the run. I'm not saying it'll be anywhere near 400-plus yards. The truth is I think LSU's got a chance to win this game. But if LSU cannot stop the Florida running game on Saturday, if this Florida offensive line gets the big push against LSU that it didn't get against Michigan, that is another knock on Ed Orgeron, because that's the thing that LSU's never supposed to yield.
The biggest concern, if I'm an LSU fan, what I've seen so far this year, I saw it against Troy, I saw it in Starkville against Mississippi State, LSU's not very physical. LSU's soft on both lines. LSU's getting pushed around, and LSU can't get pushed around by Mississippi State. It just can't happen. You look at the recruiting rankings, they can't get pushed around against Troy. That cannot happen. And if you go into Gainesville and get pushed around again, well, now you got a trend. And now you got a lot of film saying we can push these guys around and we can impose our will against them. And if you can do that against LSU, LSU has suddenly lost that mystique. They've suddenly lost a physical advantage they've always had for years and years. And once you lose that, how do you get it back?
Absolutely. All right, coming up in just a couple of minutes, we're going to take a look at one of the great seasons in recent SEC history when two gigantic personalities, one player, one coach, were certainly kind of on the scene and saying a lot about who was ruling the day at that time. We'll do that coming up. Before we get to that, though, can we participate in just a little bit of a science experiment here?
Please.
Okay, so let me do item number 5 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list here. And Butch Jones this week said something that got a lot of people's attention. A lot of criticism around Tennessee right now. Well, what Jones said is that he is his own worst critic. And if you take him at face value on that, what that means is that no one is criticizing Jones more forcefully than he's criticizing himself. But could we experiment with this for a moment to see if that really is true? Let me give you a few examples from some of the popular memes you may have seen on the internet. I believe we have one example of a piece of criticism of Butch Jones here. Take a look at this on your screen. Simply an image of a snake oil salesman. Jones pointing to the snake oil, basically saying that Jones is selling a bill of goods. Do you think Jones is more critical of himself than the meme creator is critical of Jones?
No. And he's drawn the ire of the meme creators, and once you do that, it's a slippery slope.
All right, let me give you another one here. Here's another popular Butch Jones meme that's been found on the internet. Do you think Jones is more critical of himself than this? The guy who says, I don't always make bad decisions, but when I do, I make sure it's the fourth quarter. That's a pretty harsh piece of criticism. Do you think Jones is more critical of himself than that?
All I know is if you're a meme creator, if that's what you do, if that's how you enjoy your time, Butch Jones is a godsend to you right now.
All right, let me see another one here on item number 5 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10. Now, this meme has been all over the internet for a long time. Butch Jones turning his back on winning games, a little smitten here with making excuses. You think Jones is more critical of himself than that?
First of all, that's my favorite. That's my favorite by far. That's a terrific meme right there. It is floating all over the place, but that is well done by whoever created that. And no, Butch Jones is not more critical of himself. He doesn't go home and make memes of himself, if that's what you're asking.
Elder Rose says, but what's he doing with that criticism? He's in a daze. Maybe he is, and that's why you see more memes like this one. What if I told you he had a 5-star heart, was a champion of life, or forgot he had the best running back in the SEC? Inside the 10-yard line in the swamp, that's basically a mock 30 for 30 there for Butch Jones. I can't imagine Jones, who says he's harder on himself than anybody is he more critical of himself than that?
Well, if he is, he's very creative and he's very funny because, again, that is my new favorite meme of Butch Jones. I like that one a lot. Butch Jones is not that critical of himself, I promise.
All right, how about this one? Let's see. Is Jones more critical than this? For sale, trade slightly used, champion of life, good with bricks. Obviously referencing back to the bricks by bricks line. And that's the problem. Jones has so many of these sort of corny catchphrases, the memes almost write themselves. It's almost like artificial intelligence at this point.
How many of these do you have? I thought we were going to do 3 or 4. We're already up to 5 and 6 right now.
We've actually got one more here. Let's take back a look at Peyton Manning. Peyton, how's that nationwide jingle go? Tennessee just lost again. That's the first time I've ever sang on this song on this show, by the way.
Yeah, hopefully the last.
Yeah, so I have a hard time believing that Jones is more critical of himself than some of those meme creators on the internet might be.
Butch Jones is, he can say, his problem is he continues to put his foot in his mouth. Even when he's trying to make things better, when he's trying to say something as innocuous as I'm my own worst critic, on the surface, that's not that bad. But, he just keeps digging the hole. Like you said, he has so many of these ridiculous sayings, the 5-star heart, the champions of life, brick by brick, all of this. He gives people fuel. He gives people stuff to use against him.
Michael Morrow has a great line. He says, Butch is only saying what he thinks everybody else wants to hear. And I believe you may be right about that, Michael, but here's the thing. I think Butch's decoder is broken. I think his ability to interpret what other people want to hear, I just don't think that works very well. I think he thinks he's saying the right thing, but he doesn't have a good idea of what other people think the right thing to say would be.
If he were a quarterback, you would say he lacks situational awareness. He lacks the acumen or whatever it is to say this is what I need to do in this situation. It's 3rd and 5. I need to throw it away if something's not there. He lacks situational awareness, and maybe he lacks personal awareness, but because he keeps giving people this fuel, he keeps giving people this ammo to use against him, and it just gets worse and worse and worse each week.
One of my favorite days here on AT&T SEC Country Live is Wednesday because it gives us an opportunity to look back on some of the great seasons in recent SEC history. We call it Seasons to Remember. It's brought to you by Tony Sacheries, and right now let's take a look at the year of 2012.
Tony Sacheries presents Seasons to Remember and a look back at 2012. A year like many others in the last decade that ended with Alabama riding high as national champions. But a season that also served as a reminder that not all championship years are perfect. Case in point, one of the most thrilling moments of 2012 was an Alabama loss to SEC newcomer Texas A&M and its electrifying quarterback Johnny Manziel, who used the Crimson Tide upset to propel his way to the Heisman Trophy. Alabama and Texas A&M will play once again this Saturday. Elsewhere in the SEC, 2012 was a good year for Georgia, who knocked off then number 2 ranked Florida in Week 9 on its way to an SEC East crown. The Bulldogs, currently ranked number 5 in the AP poll, haven't won the East since then, though. Of course, UGA's only regular season blemish in 2012 came at the hands of South Carolina, a team that was, at the time, in the heyday of the Steve Spurrier era. The Gamecocks finished 11-2 in 2012, and Spurrier, affectionately known as the head ball coach, was just like Johnny Manziel, one of the unforgettable personalities that made 2012 a season to remember.
And Seasons to Remember here on AT&T SEC Country Live is brought to you by Tony Sacheries. And if you're looking to spice up your next tailgate, look no further than Tony Sacheries, tailgate champion since 1972. Tony Sacheries makes everything taste great. And I'm sure you have great memories of 2012 as an SEC fan, paying close attention to kind of everything that happened that year, whether it be the Alabama National Championship, the Johnny Manziel Heisman Trophy. It really was kind of a time when the SEC felt like it was in a bit of a heyday, and when this league was kind of at its sort of apex in terms of media attention and fan excitement. 2012 was quite a year.
2012 was quite a year, and I think it's remembered, to me, it's remembered as the year of Johnny Manziel. I mean, he came out like a lightning bolt. Nobody really expected it as a redshirt freshman, and whatever he did in the pros, whatever he did in the last couple of years is what it is. But he was an incredible college football talent. That year was incredible to watch, and it was. It seems like that time was 10 years ago now, even though it was just 5. But the SEC was mighty, it was dominant, and it was really fun season.
All right, that's Brandon Walker. My name that's Mike Johnson.
Yeah,
I'm just like a
Walker.
robot. I just essentially just say I'm like Ron Burgundy. I just sort of say the same thing.
Yeah.
That's not Mike Johnson. Mike will be back tomorrow, though. This is Brandon Walker. He's in for Mike Johnson today. Brandon does our Mississippi State podcast for us here at SECCountry.com, and this is AT&T SEC Country Live. Of course, AT&T, a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live, AT&T Entertainment your way. Let me dive back into item number 6 here on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list, and I thought that Kirby Smart said something interesting this week, and maybe you have to be a Georgia fan. We have a lot of those watching, of course, right now to kind of truly appreciate what I think is a little bit of a gravitational shift here for Kirby Smart. But Kirby was asked, we'll actually let you hear the question and Smart's response. This defense you've got right now, it's playing really well. Does this remind you of some of the ones you had at Alabama? Well, Kirby Smart gave a pretty interesting answer to that. Take a listen.
I don't know if you've heard it. A lot of people say Georgia's defense right now is playing very Alabama-like. Do you think that's fair? Do you like that conversation?
Well, I would argue that Eric Russell would say they're playing junkyard dog-like. That takes a lot more pride to me, being a Georgia alum, and the fact that our kids are playing hard and playing to a standard that was created a long time around here of flying to the ball and hitting people.
So you and I were talking about this before the show a little bit. There are a lot of comparisons between Georgia now and Alabama then, with good reason. Kirby was obviously brought to Georgia to bring some of that success and sort of put in place some of those systems that worked so well for Alabama. But there's also a sense that Georgia fans want to occupy their own identity. They don't want to just be the new Alabama. They want to be Georgia. And sometimes that means kind of hearkening back to the good old days of Georgia in the early 80s. Is that a signal from Kirby Smart right there that whatever he had going on in Alabama, that's kind of in the past now? It is, for lack of a better phrase, out of his system, and now Kirby Smart's all about Georgia, his alma mater, and all about what he's building at Georgia, not what he did build while he was at Alabama?
Well, I think we just talked about a guy that lacks self-awareness and lacks situational awareness. I think this is a case of a coach having tremendous situational awareness and being aware of the room he's in, the audience he's keeping, who he's talking to. Obviously, Georgia has a great history of football in its own right. Georgia has defenses in its past that are legendary, just like Alabama's had the last couple of years. But Kirby knows his room, he knows his audience, and he's able to harken back to those Georgia defenses, and he's saying this group of Georgia Bulldogs is like that group of Georgia Bulldogs. Don't bring the Alabama Crimson Tide in here. We can compare to our own great defenses in the past. I think it's a savvy move by a savvy coach.
And by the way, if you're not, like I'm 40, I barely remember the Irk Russell era at Georgia. Don't really know too much about that, or I shouldn't say I don't know too much about it. Don't remember actually watching a lot of those games. But if you're too young to even know about that, Russell had the bald head, and before the game, he'd slam his head on the football players' helmets. He'd get the trickle of blood running down like an old NWA wrestler, something like that. I mean, it really was a great era of college football in general, but for Georgia specifically. And I do think Georgia fans enjoy having a coach because he is an alumnus of UGA that can kind of appreciate that history, and it makes success that Georgia's enjoying right now all the more fun because it's the coach who can kind of tie all these eras for Georgia together.
Well, what fan base wouldn't like that? What fan base wouldn't like a coach that was homegrown, a coach that came from them and is taking them back to where they were? I mean, that's a SEC fan's dream.
Right.
I would love, as a Mississippi State guy, to see a Mississippi State guy emerge and lead Mississippi State to greatness. And Kirby Smart seems to be leading Georgia, if not to greatness. He's certainly on an upward trajectory and on that path. Now, what I thought Kirby kind of downplayed was it's a tremendous compliment for somebody to say your defense is Alabama-like. I felt like maybe he could have said that, but again, he's speaking to a Georgia room and a Georgia audience.
Wolf Walden's got a great comment. He says, for a team that so many of y'all claim is overrated, Alabama, y'all certainly try to compare teams to them constantly. And Wolf, that is kind of an interesting thing here where I'll admit there are a lot of Georgia fans who don't like the constant comparisons to Alabama because they do want to be their own program, and yet there is, to your point, no greater compliment than that to say this group is playing like Alabama right now. And if it is true, and I think to a certain extent it probably is true, the reason why is because since Kirby Smart's been here at Georgia, he has been bringing in players that do look like the same kind of recruits that Saban was winning with for such a long time. For a while, Georgia simply wasn't recruiting an Alabama caliber of player, but now with Kirby Smart it is.
I went to the Mississippi State-Georgia game in Athens, and I was struck in warm-ups. And then in the first series for Mississippi State, Georgia's defense looks different. It just looks different. It looks like a defense that has been crafted by somebody who knows what he's doing, by somebody who wants speed and size at every single position. Yeah, saying you're like Alabama is a tremendous compliment. It's probably the highest compliment you can give in the SEC right now, especially defensively. Georgia is building a defense that looks different. When you go see Alabama play on Saturday, not on TV, but when you go in person, they look different than the team they're playing against, and that's what I saw from the Georgia Bulldogs.
All right, let's do item number 7 on our AT&T SEC Country Live 1st and 10. We'll get Mike Griffith here coming up in a couple minutes. Before that, can we do a little, not Monday morning quarterbacking, because that's what you do after the game was played on Saturday. Let's do a little Wednesday afternoon quarterbacking. Let's talk about what a team should do on Saturday, at least the possibility of what it should do on Saturday. I want to show you some stats here for Florida quarterback Malik Zaire, a guy that has not played really much at all this season. But if you look down there at the bottom, you see what Zaire was able to do against LSU in a bowl game going back to 2014 when Zaire still played at Notre Dame. 12 of 15 passing, 96 yards and a touchdown. Also added 96 yards on the ground for a touchdown. Well, Florida is still trying to figure out some things offensively. Quarterback Luke Del Rio gone for the season. Based on the numbers I just showed you there, should Florida consider playing Zaire some Saturday against LSU?
It's a very interesting thought. It's a good question, thought-provoking question, but no, they shouldn't, not even a little bit. Don't even consider it. It would be a disaster. Malik Zaire, what he brings to the table is his running ability. What he brings to the table is his shiftiness. And what Florida's got right now, Florida's had enough upheaval at quarterback. They've had enough. You've gone from Franks to Zaire to Franks to Del Rio, now back to Franks. You need to stop the upheaval at quarterback. And what Zaire brings you, you've already got. You've got Felipe Franks, his great arm. Felipe Franks has the best arm on the team. And then the legs that Zaire brings you, you've got that in freshman Kadarius Toney's Wildcat formation. So you bring in Toney, he's explosive. You got Franks' big arm. You've got the combination you need. That's what you need to stick with if you're Florida, in my opinion. And I don't think bringing Zaire in at this point would be productive at all.
John Rosado says the only reason why he would bring in Zaire is if Franks struggles heavily. But the truth is, it's not out of the realm of possibility that Franks could struggle heavily. The fact of the matter is, for most of the Tennessee game, the Florida offense wasn't really moving the football. Franks was benched during the Kentucky game, and McElwain went back to Del Rio as his starter for the Vanderbilt game for a reason. Now, obviously, Del Rio's injured, but it's not like that Felipe Franks has such a stranglehold on this job that no other quarterback could be considered. Now, I agree with a lot of what you said. if you want to do wildcat, mobile quarterback stuff, Kadarius Toney may be the better option there. But can you completely discount the fact that Zaire is a quarterback who has a good game against Florida on his resume, and that's not something that Felipe Franks can say right now because Franks has never played against LSU.
No, but you're talking about two different things. You're talking about going in with a game plan to play Malik Zaire and going in and reacting to the actual game and playing Malik Zaire. If you react to the game and Felipe Franks completes 2 of his first 11 or 12 passes, if he throws a couple of picks, if he puts you behind, sure, you think about putting somebody else in there to change the way the game is going. But going into the game plan, going into this Saturday, saying, I'm going to play Malik Zaire, that would be a disaster for Florida.
Cliff Nelson says Florida, he's one of our biggest LSU fans, you should know, Brandon. Florida will have to play Zaire because Frank's going to be pulled in the game by halftime. And that's some confidence coming from an LSU fan. He obviously wants to circle the wagons here a little bit. I won't go that far, but this notion that Franks is a guarantee to play well against LSU on Saturday, that's misunderstanding, I think, what Franks has done for most of the year.
I think it might be. It might be. But I do think you have to quit the upheaval at some point. You have to at least just trust Franks and say, listen, we got to settle on one guy right now. We got to go forward with one guy. And I will say this: if somebody's insinuating that LSU will force Franks out of the game, if they'll play so well that they force Franks out of the game, they didn't force Troy's quarterback out of the game.
Yeah.
They didn't force Nick Fitzgerald out of the game.
That's a good point.
So I don't think they're going to force Franks out of the game.
Greg Steele, a Florida fan, always gives me grief in the comment section. You should know that. He says, BA keeps hoping Florida's going to play Malik Zaire. Honestly, that's not what I'm saying here. I just think it's kind of statistically interesting that a guy like Zaire, one of the few teams he's even played against, I mean, he didn't play a lot at Notre Dame, but one of the few teams he played against, really one of, I guess, the 2 good games he had while he was there. One of them was against Texas, one of them against LSU. It is the team that Florida plays on Saturday.
Now, that was not an elite LSU team he played, but
No.
that was definitely a better LSU team than the one that's going to show up in the swamp this Saturday. That's definitely a better LSU team and defense than the one that's going to show up in Gainesville this Saturday. So I understand Malik Zaire has a history, but sometimes history is best left in the past.
Chris Smith says, BA, you have to consider the coach's ability to use Zaire. Ours can't. And, maybe that's the case. Maybe Nussmeier and McElwain are more of those sort of drop-back passers, drop-back, coaches fitting the skill set for Felipe Franks. Maybe that's what it's more about there. And maybe that's the case. They seem to be pretty creative right now how they're using Kadarius Toney. And the best point of all of this may be that Zaire is an option if you don't have Toney, but maybe Toney's just a better option right now.
Very possibly. Somebody says the coach can't use Malik Zaire. Well, that seems to be a theme so far in Malik Zaire's entire career. I'm beginning to think Malik Zaire is an actual unicorn or something that doesn't exist because fans have this idea of his ability that he's going to come in and change the game, that he's going to come in and move the ball down the field and be this whirling dervish on offense. It just hasn't really happened. He didn't keep the job at Notre Dame. He was given an opportunity against Michigan for Florida, didn't really keep it there. So, no, I don't really think it's a matter of Florida coaches not being able to use Zaire. It's a matter of Zaire really not being the answer to what fans think he is.
Rastaman Blair says the LSU defense can't stop the run. Did you see the Mississippi State game, the Troy State game? We're going to pound them all game, staying ahead of the sticks with some play action. I mean, are we really just writing off this entire LSU defense right now? I know that Arden Key is more of a pass rusher than a run stopper. I know he hasn't really had a great season. I know there have been some personnel losses of that defensive line before the start of the year, but we just totally written off the LSU defense here 5 games into a season?
Maybe, and maybe it's at our peril. Maybe we're wrong to do it. But I'll tell you what, Brandon, a 30-point loss against Mississippi State and a loss at home to Troy will get a lot of teams written off, not just LSU.
Yeah, that's a really good point. All right, we're going to catch up with Mike Griffith here in a moment whenever he's ready to go. Let me move on for now, though. Let's talk about a subject near and dear to your heart. That's the Mississippi State Bulldogs. Maybe not the greatest news here, but I think there's a defense to be given of Mississippi State coach Dan Mullen. That's actually why I wanted to bring this into the show. It's item number 8 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. So ESPN put out a tweet the other day of a pretty surprising statistic after Mississippi State lost again to Auburn on Saturday. Take a look at the record for Mississippi State coach Dan Mullen when it comes to ranked opponents. Dan Mullen, 2-15 in ranked matchups. That's a game in which his team's ranked in the top 25 and his opponent is as well. That's the worst record in AP poll history. Now, that obviously on its face does not look good, but here's why I think this is more of like a statistical curiosity than it is some sort of damnation of Dan Mullen. How many of those games has Mullen ever had the same number of 4- and 5-star players, prospects coming out of high school as his opponent? I'm not going to sort of criticize a guy too much for having a poor record in games in which the other coach has the most talent, because the team with the better players is going to win almost every single Saturday. I don't care how good of a coach you are. And in Mullen's case, I do think he's a pretty good coach.
Here's the thing. I look at the stat, and I see 17 games against ranked opponents in 9 years for Dan Mullen, 8 years and 5 games, whatever it is. And that's probably the first time that's ever happened in Mississippi State history. Listen, you're not dealing with a program that has won multiple national championships, multiple SEC championships. You're dealing with a program that gets the players it gets. Dan Mullen has proven he can get players. He's proven he can get quarterbacks. He's proven he can get Mississippi State to the dance. He can get them on the dance floor. Sure, you look at it, 2-15 against ranked opponents. Well, how many of those ranked opponents you play in the SEC West? You're not just playing number 23. You're not playing number 21 who's clinging to life. You're playing number 1.
Yeah.
You're playing number 2. You're playing national champion LSU, national champion Alabama, national champion Auburn in that time. So it's a little different looking at it. You can really shape the number to be whatever you really want it to be.
Let me check in Knoxville, Tennessee here. Say hello to Mike Griffith, who covers the Tennessee Vols for SECCountry.com. And as you know, it's been a hot topic. Butch Jones, someone in battle before the Georgia game. After a 41-0 final score, the assumption would be that things are getting worse for him there in Knoxville. You're there on the ground. What has it been like these last few days?
Yeah, there's a lot of tension, a lot of unhappy Vols fans. Obviously, Tennessee not accustomed to losing to Georgia lately for one, but losing 41-0. I mean, as good as this Georgia team, and I think I told you last week that this was going to happen. I couldn't have even seen 41-0. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of speculation here that this could be Butch's last year, and you know, the South Carolina game coming up, that's big, but then they got to play Alabama. I mean, can Butch save his job is one storyline, and if not, then who are some of the coaches that you look at as potential replacements for Butch Jones?
Yeah, that's a good point as well. That's the next thing you have to talk about, and I will give you credit. You kind of called this one when you were with us last week that you thought it would be an easy Georgia win, even though some of us, including me, thought Tennessee might give a little bit more of a close game than that. So let me ask you about a subject that I know you've written about a lot, and that's how the higher-ups, Jones' bosses, kind of view him. Does he have support of John Currie right now? I know that Peyton Manning, who's an instrumental figure, I know he kind of came out and spoke about Jones on a radio interview before the game against Georgia last week. The people who matter in Knoxville, does Jones still have their support for now?
Yeah, well, he does until he doesn't. You know, I mean, and Tennessee's got to decide what they want, Brandon. I mean, if they want to have the 7th highest paid coach in the SEC and the 8th largest expenditures in the league, then you're going to get 8, 9-win seasons, graduate kids, you know, take care of the off-the-field issues. There's none of those troubles. But if you want to compete with the Alabamas of the world and the Ohio State and the Michigans, then you're going to have to invest like that. If you make a move away from Butch Jones, let's not talk about Dan Mullen, all right? He lost to South Alabama last year. Let's quit pretending that if he was all that great, Florida would have hired him back the first chance they wanted. He likes Mississippi State, Starkville. Starkville likes him. This is the big time here. There's a lot of scrutiny. You can't just hide away in your office and live in a small town and live a private life here. You're on the spot here. I mean, Tennessee is big time football. There's a ton of scrutiny. There's availability twice this week at the bye week. You got to meet with media 3 times a week. You got to fly across the state, do quarterback dinners. You got to be able to recruit nationally. If you want to be able to compete with Georgia and Alabama, Georgia just has to look in their backyard. You want to talk about an underperforming program, that's Georgia. I mean, look at Ohio State. They can win with Ohio State. They can win championships. Georgia can win championships if they take care of business and recruit the kids from their own backyard like Josh Dobbs would have never lost to Tennessee the last few years, I'll tell you that. So if you want to bring somebody in here to Tennessee and compete for a national championship, then you better be ready to dig in the pocketbook and pay between $8 and $11 million a year, and you better increase your football budget from $28 million a year to over $50 million a year where Alabama's at.
So if we look ahead for Tennessee, apart from whatever Butch Jones' future might be, how about the Vols on the field this season? You mentioned bye week. I believe it's South Carolina, the game after that. Is there still a chance this season could be salvaged when you look at Tennessee compared to the opponents it's about to play?
I think so. You know, and again, I'm not saying that this is what Tennessee wants to do. In fact, they would love it if Butch Jones could somehow save the season. And I think we all look at the game that Alabama's lost, but what if? What if he beats South Carolina and then he wins at Kentucky? He beats Southern Miss and he beats Missouri and he beats Vanderbilt. And what if they finish the season, 8-4 and go to a bowl game 9-4 and we see signs of life, and would they keep Butch Jones? I don't know the answer to that question. Part of me thinks that they would want to keep Butch Jones because he has taken care of business in the classroom and off the field and all those things that when you're in trouble like Tennessee was when he took over, a lot of people are saying, oh my gosh, this is be competitive again. Okay, we're competitive again. But now that you've seen the leaps and strides that Georgia has made with Kirby Smart and the control he has in that state, rewriting sunshine laws and things like that, that's a powerhouse. I mean, that Georgia, as I said last week, that's a big red locomotive coming downhill, and I don't see anybody slowing them down until they hit Atlanta in the Crimson Tide in December. But for Tennessee, Tennessee's got to make some decisions as far as what they want, and it all starts with what happens against South Carolina. I mean, if Tennessee loses to South Carolina, then I think it comes to a foregone conclusion that there will be a coaching change, and then you just wonder, will there be an interim, or does Butch finish the year? And then you wonder what direction do they go in. Is Tennessee ready to start spending big money on a head coach? And then even if you are ready to start spending big money, who's really out there? Chip Kelly had a show cause clause, an NCAA problem. I mean, this is the guy that was paying somebody to help him recruit. If you can't recruit and you come to Tennessee, you're not going to do well. And Chip Kelly didn't like recruiting. I mean, you can go back and ask anybody that covered Oregon. And, who's Tennessee's Jim Harbaugh if they make that move? Who's their Urban Meyer? Who's their Nick Saban? Part of the problem is there doesn't seem to be that guy that slam dunk hire out there, even if you did have unlimited funds.
So, Mike, I'll bring you in for this last question. Brandon Walker, you can weigh in on this as well. If we did just sort of speak about this out in the open hypothetically, is it more like a T. Martin, who is a good recruiter and doing some nice things?
No. He's never been a head coach, Brandon. You can't bring a guy in here that's never been a head coach. Tennessee's not an – listen, this isn't Georgia. You've got to recruit nationally here. You don't have 60 to 70 D1 prospects in your backyard. You're not going to rewrite any laws on not let people, look at documents. This isn't Georgia. It's not Alabama. It's Tennessee. You got to recruit nationally here.
Well, wouldn't the guy that worked in L.A. help you do that? But wouldn't the guy that worked in L.A. help you recruit nationally? And Martin, by almost everybody's estimation, is a good recruiter.
Well, he is a good recruiter, but people don't want to leave their state. And, you got to go in and beat the state school. That's why what Tennessee's done. I mean, when Tennessee's won championship, Brandon, they've done it with Georgia guys. They did it with Cozy Coleman and Jamal Lewis's and Deion Grant. They don't have the luxury that Georgia does. I mean, Georgia's got everybody in the backyard that they need. If they just recruit in their backyard, it's hard to go out of state and pull kids. And Tennessee, there used to be a reason. Tennessee used to have the biggest and best facilities, and they used to be one of the primetime teams on cable television. Well, now everyone's on television, and now everybody has great facilities. So what are you going to do to attract this talent to Tennessee? You've got to be a star maker. You've got to have star power. You've got to be able to get kids in the NFL. You've got to have a big-name coach.
Hey, Mike, great stuff. Really passionate points. We appreciate your time here on AT&T SEC Country Live. We'll look forward to more of your Vols coverage there at SECCountry.com. Mike, thank you so much.
Thank you. Brandon, don't get too mad at me about that South Alabama game. I hated bringing that up with you there.
I'll get you shortly, Mike. I'll get you.
that is Mike Griffith. Listen, Mike is an equal opportunity offender. I mean, he comes on the show, he's just shooting planes out of the sky. Georgia's overrated. Mississippi State's coach is a joke. When Mike is here, he's on Alabama. Mike is quite the provocateur when he shows up on AT&T SEC Country Live. That's why I love when he comes on, because he's going to say something interesting, and he always has like this really cool backdrop. I mean, he looked like he was shooting a music video there. Got the city in the background, the railroad tracks. That was like sort of a rustic, authentic, cool-looking thing.
Were you like me? Were you worried a train was going to come by during that shot?
When that music popped up there for a moment, I thought that was a train whistle for a second.
Right, I was really worried. But I'm very impressed that Mike was able to turn a question about Butch Jones and Tennessee into Dan Mullen is terrible and Georgia is overrated and awful.
All right, now we're running late, so let me just do this real quick. If you had a choice, prototype for the next Tennessee coach, if there is one. You want an up-and-comer like T. Martin. You want an established name like a Chip Kelly or a Bob Stoops, one of those sort of pie-in-the-sky type deals. Which of those two roads are you going down? Because they are very different roads.
I think he's right that you do try to go to an established coach. Now, the question remains, can Tennessee attract that established coach? Can they attract the coach they think they can attract? I'm not sure the answer is yes to that. Like he said, Tennessee's not Georgia, it's not Auburn, it's Alabama, it's not Alabama, and it's not 1998 anymore. It's not 1997. I'm not sure Tennessee can attract the big-name coach it's going to want, so maybe they have to settle on an up-and-coming coach.
All right, item number 9 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. So, listen, I've got enough reasons to feel bad about myself every day. I don't need Alabama quarterback Jalen Hurts making me feel worse, but he was on the show, what's it called, Thinking Out Loud on the SEC Network a little earlier this week, and kind of an innocuous question was asked to him about, hey, what's the craziest thing you've ever worn? Funny Halloween costume, something like that. And apparently, Jalen Hurts, the very handsome, debonair, very successful Alabama quarterback, apparently in addition to all of that he's got going for him, has never had a wardrobe choice that he's regretted. Here's what he told Greg McElroy and the guys there on that show. Take a look.
What is the most embarrassing thing you've ever worn?
I mean, give me specifics. I want to know, give me an example.
What's the craziest Halloween costume we've worn? What's something, did you have to wear something because you lost a bet with a teammate? Like last year, I lost a bet with a buddy of mine that was a Clemson fan, and I had to wear a Clemson shirt for a week. It happens. So is there ever anything embarrassing that you've ever had to wear?
I'll try not to put myself in that situation, honestly.
Smart man.
Man, you done walked out the house and said, this ain't it. And you either walked back or you was too late.
Maybe the wrong pair of shoes. Or,
that's
true. Dealing with my mom. Why didn't you iron your shirt this morning? Something like that.
Yeah, it happens.
So the worst thing that Jalen Hurts has ever, worn, and at least in terms of regretting, was maybe a pair of shoes or a shirt that wasn't ironed well enough. Listen, do you know how many times out of a month I get to work, because I get dressed in the dark. I get up early in the morning. I'm leaving out early in the morning. When I get to work, I look down and see what I'm wearing. I'm like, this doesn't match. This has got barbecue sauce on it. This doesn't fit because I keep getting fatter every day. Do you know how many days I just hate myself because of how I look in the mirror? But you can't tell this because all we have is the audio, but if you actually watch the SEC Network show, like Jalen Hurts, they show some B-roll of him, some video, and he's like walking on the Alabama walk. He's got this nice custom-made suit head to toe. I mean, he is styling. I like what Bobby Chase Smith said in the comment section, that he's smooth. Yeah, he looks smooth and apparently talks smooth, and he doesn't have any regrets about what he wears. That's just another reason for me to feel worse about myself. Thanks a lot, Jalen.
First of all, I'm 3 hours removed from wearing a Georgia shirt for my entire podcast today because I lost a bet with, I don't think it was with you, it was somebody else in this office. So I had to wear a Georgia shirt during a Mississippi State podcast today. But Jalen Hurts, he strikes me as a guy who's just never been hurting for confidence.
No.
If you'll excuse the expression. But he could wear a bathrobe in downtown Tuscaloosa and probably fit right in. He's the Alabama starting quarterback. He's got 3 more years of that. That guy could go out in a lampshade and be just fine.
Let me tell you the exact opposite of Jalen Hurts for a second. We had to do a public appearance last week for an event. When I got there, I looked down. You know what I realized? I realized I had toothpaste all over my shoe. So I had to go into the bathroom before I went and made my sort of public appearance.
How did you have toothpaste on your shoe?
Because I brush my teeth at work every day.
Okay, but your shoe is 6 feet down.
Yeah, but the stuff just comes I spit and slobber all over the stage during the show. You can imagine what it's like when I'm brushing my teeth. So I'm in the bathroom at the local establishment. We're doing our public appearance. I'm scrubbing toothpaste off my shoe before I go out there and do my thing. That's the exact opposite of Jalen Hurts, who says, listen, I've never worn anything that didn't make me look absolutely cool.
I'm very excited that I got the toothpaste on a shoe story today here on my only appearance on SEC Country Live. It's a first for me.
All right, let's do item number 10 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And you know what? No jokes here, no snarkiness. I think this is pretty dadgum cool. So, as we mentioned during our Tony Sashery season to remember a little earlier, A&M and Alabama renew their series this Saturday, and the game's going to be played in College Station, Texas, and Texas A&M kind of doing a cool thing here. Going to honor one of its former coaches, Gene Stallings, who also won a national championship at Alabama, kind of thinking back to his 1967 Southwest Conference championship team. We'll actually show you the tweet here from Texas A&M. They're kind of getting this deal ready on the field. You see a nice picture there of Stallings. Of course, Stallings right now battling after suffering a stroke a few days ago. Sounds like he's doing okay, working out, trying to get his way back to recovery here. But as he fights through that, A&M going to honor him on Saturday, picking the Alabama game to do this after his national championship at Alabama in the early 90s there. This is just a really cool gesture on the part of Texas A&M. This is a really classy move here.
We talked earlier in the show, we like it when coaches get a little war of words. I really like it when we see something like this.
That's a really cool thing.
Texas A&M didn't have to do this. Texas A&M could have just gone about it. It's a big-time game. Could have not reached out to Alabama with an olive branch, but Gene Stallings has history at both schools. It seems like Texas A&M and Alabama overlap a lot, doesn't it, as far as their history goes? But they really do. But this is a class gesture from a class program.
Yeah, I thought that was a nice, cool thing to do. All right, we've got kind of an interesting champion of life to finish off our show with a little bit later on in just a moment. I've actually got a pretty important question for you about it. Well, we'll do that here coming up in just a moment. Before that, though, it's time for our AT&T Look Ahead. Of course, AT&T, a proud sponsor of AT&T's SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way, and we'll look ahead to some of this week's top national games. These are some of the games outside the SEC that matter on Thursday and Saturday. You got Louisville and NC State, a pretty good Thursday game here. The last year's Heisman Trophy winner against a pretty good NC State defense. That ought to be a lot of fun. And then some of those teams in competition for the playoff. Clemson, the number 2 team in the country, hosts Wake Forest at noon on Saturday. Oklahoma hosting Iowa State at noon as well. Then I guess the biggest ranked game on Saturday outside the SEC involves Will Grier, the former Florida quarterback, in West Virginia against a TCU team that's getting a lot of love, including from Mike Johnson yesterday, who said that TCU is kind of on his watch list at the moment. Not a terrible slate of games outside the SEC on Saturday.
No, TCU has put itself on everybody's watch list by going into Oklahoma State, going into Stillwater, and winning the way they did. That's a big-time win. People had Oklahoma State on the playoff watch list. Well, TCU just kind of replaces them. TCU looks good. West Virginia, you can never count them out.
Do you think Florida fans regret not having Will Grier at quarterback when you see him doing well there in Dana Holgorsen and Jake Spavital's offense?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they regret it a lot. They would trade for Will Grier tomorrow if they could. Certainly they regret it.
All right, time for our champion of life. And listen, we close the show the same way every day, much like Tennessee coach Butch Jones is, at least for right now, while he's still employed, looking for champions of life. We're also looking for champions of life here on AT&T SEC Country Live as well. And today it's Clemson coach Dabo Swinney. Now I want to show you a little bit of a video that was captured of him kind of going off about a reporter's question here. And some people are going to tell you this is an audition for the Nick Saban role of the the hard-nosed football coach that gives the media what it deserves. There's an element from Dabo Swinney that I'm just not quite buying. Watch a little bit of this, and Brandon, you tell me what you think about it.
You recruited Ryan Carter. Did you envision that he could be the kind of player he's turned out to be?
Sure did. That's why I recruited him. I don't know why y'all think we recruit people that we don't think can play. I don't understand that question. I really don't. I don't understand that question. I mean, we don't sign people here that we don't think can play great football for us. We don't sign those guys. So
this
damn
kind
right.
of goes on and on for about 3 minutes. And listen, it's a pretty good rant, but I wouldn't put this in the top 10 of rants of anything that includes Nick Saban. Right? I mean, this is not a Saban-esque rant. It's being sold that way. But Dabo is just too nice of a guy for me to buy kind of a Saban-level tirade from.
You think that was his YouTube audition? You think that was he was trying to go viral?
Yeah,
with
I mean, if you want to be the Bama coach, you got to be able to give the Bama speech, and I think that Dabo actually falls a little short there. He takes the bronze medal, not the gold medal, the way that Saban brings it home.
I'll tell you about that clip. What was wrong with that question? What was really wrong with that question? I understand the answer a little bit, but the question was just fine. I mean, did you envision him being this good when you signed this guy? I think that's a legitimate question, and Dabo kind of took it and ran off with it and did what he wanted to do with it. That's fine. He's got that right to do it, but I thought that question was okay.
Well, speaking of running off, it's time for us to run off here as well, but we'll see you again tomorrow, 3 p.m. Eastern Time. In between now and then, there are a couple things you can do to help us out. You can subscribe to our podcast on iTunes. Make sure you give that a listen, also a rating and review. That's a huge help to us. And we do AT&T's SEC Country Live here each and every day on Facebook Live. You can share this show with your friends on Facebook. Let them know that we're talking to the SEC each and every day. Brandon, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Look forward to seeing Mike Johnson again tomorrow. Look forward to you being here as well for another episode of AT&T SEC Country Live. Y'all have a great day.